Yeah. Welcome everybody to the October 1st San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee meeting. We will do item 1, introductions and welcome. Tom Burhan, District 4, and we'll start with you. Okay, front row.
Paul Donnelly, resident of Walday.
Yeah.
Jim Martin, representative District 3.
Brittany Howard, County Public Works, Water Resources Division. Angela Ford, also County Public Works, Water Resources.
Jim Green, Cambridge City.
John Winstead, Ag at Large.
Doug Grossart, Heritage Ranch CSD, alternate. Jim Walters, Development Board.
City of San Luis Obispo.
Emily Francis, City of San Luis Obispo, alternate.
Okay, we'll start in the front row here.
Reporter, County Public Works.
Steve Mulholland, Environmental at Large.
David Chipping, Environmental at Large.
Eric Green, part of the Environmental at Large Troika.
Dennis Rowley, Nicole.
I love civil organizations.
Rosemary Gaglioni, Crystal Beach.
Dominic Brock, Coastal San Luis Person.
Hugh Brown, Coachella, CSD.
Steve Carter, Slope County Farm Bureau.
Anybody else in the room that we didn't introduce? And Brandon and Joey.
Joey Style, County Public Works. Brendan Clark, County Public Works Committee Secretary.
And online, Joey.
Yeah, so for the folks who joined online, I will call your name and please feel free to introduce yourself. Jeff Edwards.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Edwards from Los Osos, and I'm in the private sector.
Mark Zimmer.
Mark Zimmer, General Manager for Golden State Water Company.
Toby Moore.
Yes, Toby Moore, Water Resource Manager for Golden State Water Company.
Douglas Twisselman. Connection issues. Heather Miranda.
I'm with Larry Walker Associates. We're a water consulting company, and I'm just here to listen and learn.
You, Jules Tuggle.
Jules Tuggle, Grover Beach City Council.
Watkins.
Matt Watkins, District 3 alternate.
You can get Jack at 340? You sure? Okay.
Derek. Sarah, are you able to unmute? Shauna Scott.
Good afternoon, Shauna Scott, Special Projects Manager, City of San Luis Obispo Utilities Department.
We'll pick you up.
Thank you. Is there anyone else we may have missed online?
Jenny Williamson, County Public Works, Water Resources.
It's like everyone.
Okay, very good. And those online, if you're opposed, any abstentions? 2 abstains. Dominic and Steve. All right, then we'll move on to the main topic of today, item 3. So fresh off their September 15th gig, the DSAL team is here to give us a presentation on what they've been doing. So Lydia will, I think, is going to kick it off.
Should be able to, yes.
Okay. All right, but if people online can't hear me, let me know, I can shout.
And please speak up, please.
Okay, yeah, I was noticing their microphones, so I'm gonna make sure people can hear me. Okay, thanks for being here today to talk about the desal plan. Hopefully, some of you caught the community workshop that we had on the 15th. We're not really repeating all of that information, trying to build on that with going a little further technically. So if you're feeling lost, please ask questions, but you can also go back and watch the video that's posted on the website and hear what we did, which covered more background. Okay. All right, so gonna quickly go over the agenda here, site screening approach, concept alternatives, the screening process we're gonna use to look at the alternatives and then talk about the community engagement session, some of the feedback we got. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so starting with the intake and outfall site screening. So we have a process that kind of gives you the overview process of the what we're doing throughout the project, where we're identifying potential sites and screening those down to viable sites, and then developing up to 12 concept alternatives, and then screening those alternatives down to 5 that we're going to develop in more detail, including cost estimates. Because it's a lot of effort to develop cost estimates, so we're trying to do some pre-screening before we start developing cost estimates. And then we'll be able to do a little more detailed comparison of those 5 alternatives. So that's the process. As said, we're screening sites, coming up with preferred sites for alternatives, and then coming up with 12. So we're going to be kind of talking about each of these a little bit. So we started with the 6 sites from the 2015 siting study, and then built on that by doing a hydrogeologic assessment of the whole coastline. We had a sub that did that, GSI, and what they're looking for the whole coastline is suitable geology for a subsurface intake. This is what is required by the state if you want to have a permittable project for desal. And the purpose of that is really to reduce environmental impacts of an open intake, which can catch fish on screen. So by having a subsurface intake, you're basically needing sandy soils because you're pulling the water through the sand, just like you do a well. So, and that's indicated on this slide by those yellow areas on the map are sandy, where sandy soils come into the shoreline. And so we identified these 16 sites that have preferable geology. So we had 22 sites in total, and then started screening that down. There we go. So first we consolidated some of the geographies. So for example, you see there's lots of green dots up in the Cambria area. And so we said, okay, well, we're gonna have Cambria be one geographic area. Right, and so doing some of the consolidation, we narrowed it down to 10 consolidated sites. So again, they're kind of general areas, not specific. And those 10 sites are located, shown here in blue. I'll read them off in case someone can't read them. Cambria, the Estro Marine Terminal, Morro Strand, Morro Bay, Los Osos, Diablo, Avila, Pismo, South Slow, wastewater treatment plant. It's not actually at the treatment plant. It's the idea is you're using their outfall, and then the Poma Mesa. Okay. And then we went through a screening process looking at these different sites where we looked at, again, the intake was really related to hydrogeology, suitable for a subsurface intake. We needed an outfall. Oh, sorry, I forgot to point out that the orange crosses on the map are where there's existing outfalls. So that's another really important point when looking at a desal project. And we're not, sorry, I'll back up for just a second. So we're using reverse osmosis. This is the standard desal process that you use, and there's a waste product that has to be disposed of, so you need an outfall. So, okay. So presence of an existing outfall, what's the capacity of that outfall? Is there wastewater that's available to blend? Looked at, what are the potential environmental impacts from a marine perspective? What are some of the land impacts related to cultural, biological, environmental protected areas? And then what's the infrastructure that would be needed to connect this site to users? So that's what we were trying to do with the site screening. And so this summarizes where we landed on the site screening. We had high scoring, medium scoring, and low scoring sites. And we kind of chose to select ones to carry forward that were in all of those buckets. So high scoring sites were Morro Strand using the Estro Marine Terminal outfall, the Morro Bay area, South Slow area. Medium scoring, Avila using a new outfall, Nipomo Mesa using that existing outfall and that brownfield site, and then Cambria for a new outfall. And some of the reasons for, and then on the right side here are the ones we're not carrying forward. Those were some of the low scoring sites. The Cambria existing outfall, which is actually San Simeon's outfall, is really too small. Diablo, the existing intake and outfall, is very unlikely to be able to be permitted for the purposes of a regional desal like this. A new intake and outfall at Diablo also was ruled out because that's very rocky. It does not have that suitable geology for a subsurface intake. And then some other medium scoring sites that didn't really have a clear advantage. The location of the Estro Marine Terminal didn't have suitable hydrogeology, even though it had been in the 2015 study. Los Osos has sensitive onshore habitat, which would make permitting difficult and didn't really have an advantage over Morro Bay. Avila, their existing outfall too small, and Pismo was further from the South Slow outfall. So where we landed then were these 6 sites that would be suitable for developing alternatives. I'll just pause there for a second. I don't need to read them again, but yeah, go ahead.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
Can you shed more light where you said low scoring, not carried forward Diablo existing? You just said it was unlikely to be able to be permitted. What's the underlying reasons?
On Diablo? Is that what the question was? Sorry. Yes. Okay. So the question is about Diablo. So the Diablo existing facility is for the power plant, right? And it is an open intake, and so it already has those environmental impacts of an open intake for sure. But if you were modifying it to add on a regional desal project, you'd have to re-permit it. And so you're going back through the permitting process with all the agencies, and they are now requiring a different standard than when that intake was first.
So it doesn't meet your criteria.
It doesn't meet the criteria, and we have a really good example of this in Carlsbad. So Carlsbad did their big desal project, and they were originally co-located with the power plant. They started off as an open intake. When that power plant shut down, they are now moving to a subsurface intake. But they have sandy soils, so they are able to do that. This is not a suitable site for that. Yes.
Yeah, just on that, Diablo will either be shutting down shortly or will be extending. Either way, right now, the final EIR on decommissioning does not contain such a project and is due to be in front of the board within a few months. And the application for relicensing in front of the NRC does not contain this, and throwing it in would complicate both processes immensely.
Right, another good reason to take it off the table.
Since I live in Morro Bay, could I get clarity on what the Morro Bay area?
Yeah, so we have, yeah, and I'll get to that in a minute, that we haven't actually picked an actual site yet. It's just the area, because certainly there's lots of sandy soils in Morro Bay, right? It's a suitable site. So what what we're trying to do is see where can you possibly have a stretch of land that you can put a subsurface intake and then use the outfall. So I think as I go
Well,
along.
I
you'll have
mean,
more
there's
information.
only, Morro Bay, the city of Morro Bay only has one outfall, so are
Right,
you is the one that says Morro Bay area, does that come with an outfall that you're,
it's using Morro Bay's outfall.
so twice? Or like, are they two different outfalls? you're
No,
talking
so
about?
that Morro Strand is using the Estro Marine Terminal outfall. Is that what you're asking about, the first bullet under high scoring sites?
The Sarah Marine, oh, okay.
Yeah. Here, so let me go back to, let me move forward. So you could, there's two different outfalls here. Yeah,
Oh, so that's more Cayucas.
yes, it's,
Got it.
right.
Thank you.
It's
And they're using the outfall for their discharge of their sewer, new sewer.
All right, multiple questions going on. Yes, it is the old Estro Marine Terminal, and Cayucas has repurposed that outfall for their wastewater. And I have a slide in a minute showing outfalls and their capacities and why we're picking different locations.
And just to also add on that one, on your criteria, did you include zoning requirements or issues?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you.
I have one quick question. The process that you put together, the presentation that we've been hearing about, is there a risk assessment available for you to review or that you went over in terms of the water that you would be pumping out of the ground for this particular project, potentially like in the refining, because it is adjacent to many large housing projects in the area that have huge wells?
We've not gotten to that kind of level yet. So this is starting again at a very high level of just, do we have suitable soils for subsurface intake? Because that's absolutely critical to get the project permitted. Do we have outfalls? You'll see in a minute, what's the capacity of that outfall? Who are the partners that we could serve? Then we're gonna, as we develop alternatives, we're gonna start digging into some of these other challenges that might be for each location.
Have you considered using the method that begun to be used in Norway, where the intake and the outflow are in the same place because they place their filters subsurface, and all you have to do is pump.
Yeah, and again, we talked a bit about that a bit in the community workshop. Didn't touch on it in this presentation, but you'll see we are carrying forward one alternative where we're going to do an alternative technology and look at that. One of the challenges we have is that there are none of those offshore technologies that are currently permitted full scale in California. And California permitting is just really challenging, and to come up with costs of something that hasn't gone through that is going to be even more challenging. So okay. Do we want to just keep going and then do questions? Because I have a lot more information that might answer some of the questions. Okay, all right. All right. Okay, so those were the sites, and now here we had a bunch of questions on the siting. And we're just asking, does this suite of sites make sense? And really what we were trying to do here again is have sites that are suitable and have the full range of geography across the shoreline. So not disadvantaging one area, like having all sites in one location, right? It's well spread out what we're trying to look at. All right, and certainly we can take more questions on this, but let's keep going because I think some of the stuff I'm going to present will give you more answers. Okay, so the next step after screening that down to those 6 viable sites is to start forming the alternatives. So we had this philosophy of wanting to create some bookends, and you saw that in the siting where we're trying to have it geographically spread out. Same with the alternatives. We want to consider a range of alternatives from small, medium, large, and even alternative technology that we just talked about. So that's really our philosophy, is to try to cover the range that of options so that you have information about what does doing a large project do for you in terms of saving because you're producing more water versus a small decentralized type approach. Okay, so I started talking about this already, but what is an alternative? It's the site, which we talked about already. It's adding in to that site, how much outfall capacity do we have? And then looking at end users, who can take the water and how much can they take? And how much do they want to take? And then looking at conveyance of how do we get that water to them? All right, so we started talking about outfalls already, but these are the 6 outfalls that are along the coast. And as you can see, the San Simeon and the Avila Beach outfalls are very small, so it doesn't really leave any room for adding in the waste product from a desal facility to provide any real benefits. So then you're starting to look at that. You've got the Cayucas, which is, sorry, in some parts of my slides, we refer to it as the Estro Marine Terminal, but same location. So what's the numbers on the top of each bar are the available capacity in million gallons a day that could be discharged to these outfalls. So that's the available capacity that could allow us to have space to. Okay, so then the next step of the alternatives analysis is the end user direct request. So figuring out who would take the water for this project. And so we started with developing a baseline water use information that's publicly available from each of the public water systems, and then did a survey of the agencies and asked them, like, what are your plans now and in the future? What are your needs? And came up with approximately 5,300 acre feet a year, or 4.7 million gallons a day of desal need was identified. And this really helps us start to create the project alternatives. And shown in the blue circle here are what some of the needs were. Some of them were to address current shortfalls. Some of them were to address drought resilience or future growth. And then some is just to plan for uncertainty, because with climate change, we may have other uncertainty in our water supplies moving forward. So we use that, and then gives me a little trouble. All right, so starting with those direct requests, that's sort of the base of what we'd like to provide, but we also wanted to play around with, well, what are the other needs that could be met beyond a partner request? Recognizing that there's regulatory and drought cutbacks like Lopez system is experiencing, could be other systems that have to have cutbacks in drought. We have 4 groundwater basins in the county that are experiencing overdraft. So is there an opportunity to use this as a supply to get people off of groundwater, to move towards more groundwater sustainability? And could it be useful for dealing with infrastructure failures? So these were some of the ideas that we had. Okay, so we took those
Just one
ideas.
question on that section. Your mention of Salinas Dam, that's obviously over the mountains from the ocean. Would the project take the form of North County purveyors, inland purveyors, essentially helping finance a project on the coast in exchange for getting the full flow of the Salinas River, rather than actually try to pump water over the San Lucias?
Yes, for the most part, we're not proposing, for the most part, we don't want to build a lot of long pipeline, right? If it's possible, we want to take advantage of existing regional pipelines and do water exchanges. So that's kind of the first place that as we start walking through these alternatives, you'll see that theme of we're starting to say, well, if we build a plant here, what kind of exchanges can happen? So, right, we don't have any options where we're taking water all the way into the Paso Basin, physical water. It's paper water exchanges.
So the Salinas drainage would benefit from not having its water taken, essentially.
Well, and what that particular graph was referring to was that if there were drought and you had a cutback, like you had less water that was available in Salinas Dam, is this source of water in desal something that could provide a stopgap measure to those people who are relying on that water supply?
A lot to be worked out, thank you.
Yes. A lot to be worked out. Okay. All right, so these are 12 concept alternatives. This is the first time we've presented them. They were not presented to the community at the community workshop yet, so you guys are our first test case. And they are changeable, so it's if you have opinions on them, please let us know. I'm going to work from north to south, and so it's kind of geographic. It's not like order of importance or anything. So starting with alternative 1, we're looking at the Cambria area. And this is a relatively small project at 330 acre-feet a year. This would be supporting both Cambria and San Simeon. Both have issues currently with drought and summer, late fall conditions. So it's relatively small amount of piping you can see there, but the issue we have here, as I mentioned before, is that San Simeon outfall is very small, and so we would need to do a new outfall here. Okay, alternative 2, moving down the coast, is to look at Morro Strand. And this one is sized at 0.94 MGD, which is the available capacity in that Cayucas or Northern Terminal outfall. It supports direct requests and some jurisdictional release local drought considerations that I talked on the earlier slide. And how we're proposing to do this is through exchanges with Morro Bay for state water. So there is an intertie between state water and the Lopez system. So those Lopez cutbacks, the people who are experiencing Lopez cutbacks, the idea is that more state water can be pushed to them. So this is what we just were talking about, using paper exchanges to move water around. And that, as I mentioned, would use the Estro Marine Terminal outfall. Okay. All right. We have a second one at this same location that's kind of a different configuration, similar size, where we're really trying to max out what available capacity is in that outfall. But in this one, we're taking a pipeline all the way up to the North Coast users, Cambria and San Simeon, and we're also picking up Los Osos, as they have a need. And then we have a little bit of extra water, so we're doing the paper exchange for Avila with state water. So a lot more piping needed in this alternative. You guys are all reading way faster than I can talk, so I won't read it all out to you. But again, this one is using that Cayucas outfall. Alternative 4, moving down the coast to Morro Bay. For the 2 outfalls that have significant capacity, which is Morro Bay and the South Slow wastewater plant, for both of these, we're showing a small, medium, and large alternative. So you'll see 3 alternatives for each of those. So starting with small on this one, this alternative was to try to hit those local direct requests and try to provide water to South County users via that Lopez state water exchange potential to try to offset the Lopez cutback. So that's a pipeline to Los Osos, and then the paper exchange for the Lopez users. And again, this is using Morro Bay's outfall. Okay, so moving on, whoops, sorry, that went the wrong direction. Okay, moving on to the medium project at Morro Bay. This is producing more water sorry, I didn't actually say how much the last one was. The last one is just under 2,000 acre feet a year for small. The medium here, we're going up to 3,400 acre feet a year. So we have a little bit more water to play with. In this scenario, we are again picking up Los Osos and serving the South County users, but we also are taking a pipeline into San Luis Obispo to serve SLO and Cal Poly with their direct requests and providing, drought relief. So more pipeline than the last alternative, which is required really to get to a larger volume of use, but using the Morro Bay outfall again. Okay, and then moving to the Morro Bay large alternative, this is really kind of maximizing the extent by taking water both to the south and the north. So we're taking a pipeline all the way up to Cambria and San Simeon. We're serving Los Osos. We're taking water to San Luis Obispo, and we're actually pushing more water through that line to San Luis Obispo so that there can be some exchanges with the Paso Basin and what we were just talking about before, to both to folks like Templeton who've asked for a direct request, as well as to start helping Paso Basin address their groundwater overdraft, Cal Poly, and then the South County users via the exchange idea. So more pipe length and outfall at Morro Bay again.
I got a question. Where's Whale Rock in this? Because there's a pipeline, existing pipeline into Whale Rock. I don't see it being mentioned here. Why do you need another pipeline to Whale Rock?
Yeah, so we talked about that. The problem is that Whale Rock is a raw pipeline. So it's not treated yet. And we're going to be producing treated water. So if you put it in that pipeline, you have a big volume that then SLO would have to retreat. But the alignment, we'd like to reuse the alignment. Okay. Avila. So moving down the coast to Avila. This one's a little bit flexible. We're showing it as a little bit more than 1,000 acre foot a year. But as I mentioned earlier, the Avila outfall is very small. So this is another one where we would be looking at a new outfall. So if we could make it bigger, this was just our starting point for an alternative. And in this one, we're serving Avila's direct requests and their Lopez use, as well as taking a pipeline into San Luis Obispo to be able to serve San Luis and Cal Poly, and then also some exchange with Nacimiento. But we could make this bigger. It could provide more groundwater offset for the groundwater sustainability agencies. You could add a pipeline out to Los Osos. So this one could be it could be small, medium, or large, but we started with small. Okay, so moving on down to South San Luis Obispo, again, because this is a larger outfall, we're doing the small, medium, and large alternatives. Starting with the small, we're really hitting here just those South County Lopez users and Napomo, and they had a 500 acre foot request. So that's what this alternative is.
Who requested it for
We sent out a survey to each of the water agencies, asking them what their needs were, either now or in the future, when they needed the water, how much.
So this doesn't take into consideration population estimate growth, or does it already include that?
It's, yeah, I don't know, Courtney, if you want to help with that one. I mean,
I think in general for all of these, it was, in order to do this type of planning effort, we needed some kind of ballpark for what to evaluate. And so when we asked Napomo, that was the ballpark they kind of gave us to work with. There's so many variables, but I mean, I wouldn't, yeah, so I would just have that caveat.
In the survey, we did have a section about current and future uses, so.
Yeah.
I think each agency did their best to estimate what their future usage would be in the. So I think to some degree that.
Yeah, right, and that's what I was trying to say, it's both current, if you have current shortfalls versus future, when did you experience, when would you need it? And, some of the direct requests, that's what we're calling them, are really, reliability, right? It may not be that they actually are experiencing a shortfall right now, but they're recognizing that when we're doing a 50-year look ahead, that it's very likely that there's gonna be issues in the future. So they were just trying to take their best guess. Okay. I think I covered this one. Let me go on. So moving to medium, again, in the vicinity of the South Slough, outfall, a little larger. This one's a little less than 3,000 acre feet. And it again is serving South County, but stepping up and doing a higher volume of offsetting state water project as well. That could be because state water project is cut back in a drought, or it could be that you start opening yourself up to some opportunities to do state water project exchanges somewhere else in the system. But it's still that by limiting the infrastructure to what's nearby, just in South County, you're having less infrastructure. Okay, and then going to the large, this is where we start adding a lot more infrastructure to try to pick up more users. So we're still serving Napomo and the South County users, but we're also taking a line all the way up to the city of San Luis Obispo and Los Osos, serving Cal Poly. And through that line, we can also take water over into the Paso Basin to help with the groundwater sustainability. Again, through exchanges. So essentially it's that you're serving water to San Luis Obispo and they give Nasi water inland. Okay, so a lot more pipeline, again, using the South Slough outfall. Okay, alternative 11 is the Napomo Mesa refinery. This one is limited by the size of that outfall. So we're serving a little less than 2,000 acre feet. And so really we're focusing on that South County and Napomo uses again. And yeah, using that outfall. So those were our first 11 alternatives. And then we were scoped for 12 alternatives. So we were trying to figure out what our 12th alternative would be. And we decided to include, go too fast, include an alternative technology like I talked about, even though we recognize it's going to be very hard to define what the permitting and costs would be for it, that we definitely wanted to include it in the study of alternative technologies because it's certainly something that's worth considering in the future. So we have alternative technology and we've selected to put it in Cambria because that is a more remote location. It might be suitable for that kind of technology of a smaller satellite decentralized system. So no outfall required if you do an offshore technology. Okay, so those were our 12 alternatives. So hopefully the suite of alternatives makes sense. Like I said, we were trying to do bookend, small, medium, large projects over the whole geography of the coastline. But I'll pause here if there's questions or anything else you want to see included in those alternatives. Yes. Yes.
So does the Napomo alternative presume that the county will buy the Phillips 66 property?
Well, we haven't quite gotten to that. Someone who, I don't know if Courtney wants to handle this, right? Yeah. Whoever wants to, so maybe I'll take it and Courtney can jump in here. The county's doing this feasibility study doesn't necessarily mean that the county's implementing a project, right? They're looking at, does this make sense for water users of the county? So yes, it's assuming someone would have to step up and buy that.
Okay, and then one other thing on the South County treatment plant. I don't know how many people here are aware that South County Sanitation is operating under a planning mandate from the Coastal Commission to evaluate, do a cost analysis and a relocation analysis of the entire operation by 2047, it being operational, if it happens. And the first 10-year progress report on that analysis is due in May of 2027. With the engineers I've talked to have given a time frame of about 15 years for the project, which means it would have to start in 2032. Presumably the outfall line could still stay in place, but that is going to be a variable.
Yeah, and I'm sure the contingent from Morro Bay can attest to this. They went through the same thing, right? They had to move their plant. It is a lengthy process. But the outfall remains where it was, because that is a valuable asset that's already sunk, and it frankly isn't what the concern is about being on the coast and being vulnerable to. So yes, we were aware that there are issues with the South Slow wastewater treatment plant, and that's why I said earlier, we're not locating at the wastewater plant. We want to use their outfall, so we would locate somewhere out of the floodplain and further away from the wastewater treatment plant.
Do you have any ideas, small, medium, and large, of the area of this industrial plant that would be needed when we start?
We haven't gotten there yet, but that's the next step. So I'm going to show you what we're going to be developing next. Is that for everyone's happy with the suite of alternatives, then we're going to be starting to look at what's the acreage that we would need to plant to develop a desal plant. Is that 1 acre, 5 acres, right? How many acres do we need? Is there that kind of space available at any of these locations? And just to address the industrial nature of it, you can make these look as nice as you want. You can put them in a building and make them look like a house.
And also, I believe that we're being told we're looking at a regional opportunity, the regional desal some way or other. But it appears that it's not going to serve the whole region, no matter what side you put or where you put it. That north is going to be left out on some, south is going to be left out on others. And is that right? I mean, we're not looking at one desal plant for the county, serve the county, except maybe in exchanges.
Yeah, exchanges is the main way that you can move water throughout the county, unless we wanted to take one of the alternatives and make it, a very large new everything, new outfall, right? And then pipelines all throughout the county, but we know that's going to be prohibitively expensive. So that's why we didn't go that route. It seemed like using the existing regional infrastructure and trying to take advantage of that and do exchanges. Because you're very fortunate that you do have water pipelines running all over the county where you can do exchanges.
Can you service all this with existing power?
Say that
I
again?
don't know what RO is taking in terms of stuff like that, but some of these remote locations, will they require large scale power lines? I have no idea what the energy cost would be for an RO unit in Cambria.
Yeah, and we will be developing what the power requirements will be, and we have on our team a sub-consultant that does a lot of work throughout the state, but has worked for like PG&E, their former PG&E employees that have a consultancy to look at power. And they took a look already and said there's not going to be a need for like a new power station. So we'll be able to use existing infrastructure.
And one other question, when you mentioned multiple times piping water to help your Paso Robles overdraft, is the population in other parts of the county then expected to pay for a system to make up for the deficits in Paso Robles groundwater basin? Is that part of it, what I'm hearing as a suggestion?
So we're not to the point of assigning financial responsibility, right? We don't have costs yet, but the idea with any water supply project would be, you can't pass a 218 rate hearing if you don't have a justifiable assignment of costs to the beneficiaries. So if the users of the Paso Basin are benefiting from the project, then yes, they have to pay in. Is that fair to say?
With the different funding strategies, definitely have to be evaluated when it gets decision making time to go no go. In the bigger picture steps of the process where that would have to be addressed.
So we're not saying that right, any one of these alternatives is what's going to go forward. We're trying to just look at a suite of alternatives to characterize what would this cost, what would it look like, what would the impacts be, and then after I'm long gone, you guys as a region are gonna have to decide if you want to take one of these and make a hybrid of it and move something forward or not, right? We're just trying to help you give the information on what's the feasibility.
Speaking of impact, does that, the environmental impact reports and all that, what stage does that come on?
Environmental impact reports would be later. That's when you have a selected project. So we do have on our team, folks to help us look at what the environmental impacts are. And I'll show you in just a minute, some of the tools that we're using to start to look at that. But we're not trying to do an environmental impact report kind of level of detail, right? That's when you really have a selected project.
Am I right to assume that the conveyance is the most expensive part of these? Is that why they're large?
Treatment and conveyance are gonna be, but if you had to build a new outfall too, that's expensive. So it's treatment and conveyance are the two big pieces.
Is it predetermined for the target that you just pick one alternative? Is it possible instead of picking one of the large ones, you might pick two of the smaller ones?
Sure. Which kind of addresses one of the other questions about that not every alternative serves all needs across the county equally. So if this looks like something that users in the county want to pursue, you can choose multiple options to move forward. Okay. One more, and then we'll finish the slides and open up for more questions.
Forgot this, but that the Coastal Commission in its analysis has stated that if a new treatment plant is built, it needs to be state of the art and it needs to provide tertiary treatment for all municipal wastewater in South County. So it will be a huge new source of water in South County if in fact that takes place. Central Coast Blue on steroids.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna just walk you through what we're doing next, and then we have some time for, remember when the end of the clock is, but I think we'll have time for more questions. Okay, so I already showed you this slide. We're here where the red box is of identifying the alternatives and starting to try to screen those down to the 5. So how are we doing that? We want to, again, look at those potential partners. The little green circles like represent what those direct requests are. So we're looking at who are the users, how do we get water to them if possible from each alternative. We kind of talked about that already in our alternatives development. The next piece that I think people were starting to ask questions about is site constraints, is what we're calling them. So we have this idea, I call this our pancake graphic, because it's like layers of pancakes, but where we're trying to create maps as shown on the right, and I apologize, it's a little hard to read on this big screen, but overlaying information about flood zone and sensitive habitat and marine protected areas and, right? So we're taking what the databases that are available already about sensitive habitats and different areas we might want to avoid because of hazards, and layering those together so that we can see, are there places where we could site this that are outside of those zones? So this is an example that we've done up in the Cambria area, and we found in the yellow a few different areas that look like they're outside of the majority or all of the impact areas, and we can figure out how many acres that is and then compare it to how many acres we need to build a facility. So that's the piece that we're going to be doing moving forward to try to address some of those environmental questions. For the most part, we want to see, can we stay out of those impact areas?
With environmental questions, does that also look at growth inducing impacts and what that will do to the land?
So growth inducing impacts is something that you look at in an EIR. And so again, that's really down the road. We're not trying to capture that right now.
I know that yellow patch is Hurst Ranch, which has massive conservation easements on it. So
I'm sorry, say that again?
The big area, your least potential impact there, that's Hurst Ranch up there, as far as I can see on the map. And they have conservation easements which would disallow anything.
Okay, good feedback. All right. So that's what we're going to be trying to do with the information that's available. Maybe conservation easements weren't in the data set that we had. To ask my guy about that. Okay, and then we're also going to be then trying to identify what are the technological and permitting constraints. There's a lot of different folks we have to get permits from. We're going to start having conversations with some of these regulatory agencies, explaining to them what our project's about, and we'll get some feedback on what their concerns will be. So that's really what we're doing. And we're going to have evaluation criteria that we're using to screen from the 12 to 5 alternatives, and then we'll use those again for comparing the 5 alternatives that we developed costs for. But those criteria are looking at supply benefits, desal plant location, so some of the things I talked about already of looking at impacts, and then also things like, is there water available in the outfall, and how close is it to the regional infrastructure? And then implementation considerations. We've already talked a little bit about that today, some of the agreement complexity for all these exchanges, right? So we'll just be noting for each alternative, how complex is it going to be? And clearly some of the larger projects will be more complex. Yes?
Has there been any tribal consultation to date?
Not yet.
And have you identified the tribes that have an interest in any given location? Because it's often more than one.
As part of the stakeholder engagement plan at the very beginning, we did engage with the different tribal groups to make sure that they were aware that we were starting this and to get their feedback before we even kicked off. So they are engaged.
So they are aware that this process is going on. And this is multiple tribes. There are multiple Chumash and Selena organizations. Because there was never a Chumash or a Selena Washington, D.C. They've always respected, from village to village, they've always respected each other's autonomy. And their governance today still reflects that.
I'd have to check the specific positions. We do have point of contacts with each of the tribes. And if you, on our website, the stakeholder engagement plan will describe a little bit more of that, as well as I forget what the name of it was, but there's another document about that initial feedback that we got from different groups, which includes the tribes.
Yeah, and I think that's posted on the website, right? We did it. I can't remember the name of it either. Go ahead, Carolyn, jump in.
Yeah, there's a key opinion leader report that's on the website, and I think there were 2 different tribes that chose to engage in that. I have to check if they actually all said yes. But I think we invited at least 2, but certainly there are 5 plus separate tribal entities. But that was just the beginning of the conversation. And thing to keep in mind, we certainly want that to stay on the radar. If it was
And then, just to finish up this slide, as I mentioned already, power demand and costs, we're really gonna dig into when we narrow that down to 5 alternatives. Okay, so, any questions on the screening process or criteria that you felt like oh, sorry, go ahead, Joey, do we have some online questions?
Yeah, it looks like we have at least one here.
Okay.
Let's see, Jeff Edwards, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I just had a question in terms of the land area needed for such a facility, say a 5 MGD facility. How much land is that going to take? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head yet.
A range of sizes?
It's like 10 to 30. I was just looking at this. It could be, I mean, there's a big range, but it looks like total when you factor in different buffer zones, probably 10 to 30 acres.
For 5 MG.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Following up on Christine's question about whether it would be meeting present needs, present security or resilience versus whether it would be accommodating growth. Is there anything in the process of contacting the user agencies now that could elicit that information? It does seem like knowing it sooner rather than later, that should be part of the scoring, that we would address immediate needs before we would address speculative needs that might come with future growth.
Sure, yeah, and so a lot of the information that's provided, well, some of the information, it depends on the size of the agency, but agencies that develop urban water management plans have every 5 years, they have to publish a document, turn it into DWR that says, here's what our supplies and demands are, here's what we're anticipating over the next so many decades. So we tried to use that information and then paired that up with information from the other agencies that don't produce those, but ask them if they've had planning documents to look at what their expectations are. And I'm trying to remember, we also tried to do a look with the county at what population projections would be over time based on the state's goals, right?
Yeah, I want to say, are we talking about the master water report
Yes.
too? We have this parallel effort of doing our countywide look at supply and demand for future. And so we collaborated between the 2 projects to try to help to refine that quantity to start using for these type purposes. And then I would say, I think one of your criteria was supply benefits. So
yes,
I think
it is.
I think that'll be where current needs will probably weight things, projects that, alternatives that address current needs better than
critical need.
Yeah, will probably rank a little bit higher.
But another thing to remember is that I think this is on the county's website, the timeline for the desal plan. It's looking at like implementation in 2040 or something. This is a long-term plan and it does take a long time to implement a project like this. So while today's needs are of course really important, tomorrow's needs will be there by the time this gets built, right?
And we've covered in previous presentations and the community engagement, again, the idea that we need to optimize the use of our existing resources first before going with desal. And there's a lot of efforts going on that have been discussed, especially with recycled water and conservation in the near term.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's a feasibility study. So
right.
It's not an inevitability that in 2040 or 2050 we're going to build desal. This is more like, if we look at desal, what does it take? What's it cost? Maybe the feasibility study concludes that this isn't the time to pursue desal further. So this is, just to keep in mind, this is a feasibility study of these.
Right, thank you for that clarification. Okay, one more and then maybe we'll finish up slides.
Yeah, in LA, they're combining desal with wastewater recovery RO. And you'll know more about that than I would, but is is there a study, for example, that we have this super Project Blue idea that comes out of South County? And the Coastal Commission is basically saying, take your wastewater and the desal and do it all at once and recover all the damn water rather than throwing anything into the ocean. But the constraint of doing that is maybe in the Morro Bay plant, for example, taking their sewage wastewater and seawater, if you need it, and ROing that gives it a higher strength as a project than something that only does half of that, doesn't do the recycling.
Yeah, and I don't know that I want to go too far down the rabbit hole of talking about recycled water, but there's very different requirements for doing a recycled water project than there is a desal project in terms of the layers of treatment that's required. Maybe we'll come back to it after we finish the slides if you want, but so it's certainly possible, but there are some complications. Okay. All right, and so the next segment, I'm going to ask Carolyn to come on up. We wanted to give you an overview for those of you who have not watched the video or weren't on our September 15th outreach meeting, just kind of giving an overview of what we heard at that meeting, as well as an online survey that we were doing.
Thanks, Lydia. I'm Carolyn Berg. I'm one of the staff consultants on this project and know some of you from my former life at the county. This is just a snapshot, like Lydia said, so we kept it really high level. But since we saw you, I think in May, to give you a brief overview of the project in the beginning, we've updated the county's desal website with newer information, this study's timeline, updated the FAQs so that those commonly asked questions can keep guiding the community's thinking and give them resources. The district also sent out a wide array of email blasts about the survey and community session, and the partner agencies did as well. And then there were a number of social media posts from the different partner agencies, just letting the community know that this conversation is starting and that we'd love to have them engage and get involved. So as Lydia mentioned, our first session was virtual. It's on September 15th. So thank you to you all who helped to spread the word on that. We got 70 participants, which I think for a first conversation around a very conceptual level desal project or study in this case is a good turnout. There was really good participation. We had a few of the desal partners, so the communities that are thinking about this project, helped give some framing of why they're considering this. And Courtney and Lydia also gave some details on the big picture of water resources, as well as the specific desalination study and how it could fit in. We did Q&A throughout that, conducted some in-meeting surveys and brought in suggestions and feedback that way. And then we also had an online community survey that ran for 3 weeks before and after the session. So through that, we got 154 participants. And again, that's another opportunity to get big picture input on water resources in general, and then start to get input on the early aspects of this desalination feasibility study and how people want to be communicated with. So, quick picture of what we heard back. So some top things we asked, what do people think about when in the community session, when they think of the future of this region's water, what do they think? Probably unsurprising to you all, we heard themes, especially around the preciousness or essential nature of our water in the future and how uncertain and variable it is. And some of the underlying secondary themes there, drought, complexity, reliability, they fit in that same vein. It's really about security and also how complex it is. And then we moved into desalination, and some of the benefits that we heard from the community in the session were around the resilience and reliability that could be created with desalination. But again, unsurprisingly, the biggest concern was cost. So what would this look like in addition to things like environmental and cultural impacts and energy use? So the word cloud in the top is just an example of how we collected the feedback. I want to ask, how many of you came to the session? Great. Yeah, thanks for being there. There we go. And then a couple other key items that came out. So we asked for a screening criteria, which ones matter the most when we're thinking about where a desal facility could go. And two of the biggest areas of importance were conveyance infrastructure that would be needed and the intake location. And then there was interest in all the sites that Lydia just talked about, but a stronger preference for the South Slope County and the Nipomo Mesa. And more interest in the regional or large scale projects. But again, there was interest across the board on all of the options. These are just the areas of higher interest. And then finally, when we think about feasibility criteria for desal in general, what matters most to people? So facility siting and water rate impacts were of highest importance to people, but that doesn't take away from some people cared a lot about brine disposal or the cultural impacts and energy consumption. But across the board, we heard more on facility siting and water rate impact. And when we look at the survey, I pulled out a few items. Again, how many of you were able to take the online survey that we did? For you. So interestingly, I know you all are steeped deeply in the world of water, but across your community members and the broader public, 97% of people consider themselves to be pretty aware of their current water supply sources. 70% of people felt there's need for more water when we look into the future, and 15% were unsure. So that means only 15% of people thought there's no need to consider more water. And then the bottom graph is just showing you people's rating of the current water supply versus long-term water supply. So when the people reflected on their community's current water supply, they rated it fair to good. And then as they thought longer term, they thought it was more moving towards weak to fair. And then the second slide, as you're all from around the region, we thought you'd find it interesting to see, 43% of participants deem their area of residence to be in the North Coast. Then you can see the rest of the breakdown of subregions. 77% or so felt it was possible to implement desalination in the county. And of the feasibility criteria, similar to during the session, we heard environmental impacts, facility cost, and operating costs were some of the highest areas of importance for criteria. That's just a quick overview.
Back again, if I'm reading this right, your first bullet up there, subregions of participants, largest group of people participating were on the North Coast, but previously, I think you said that the largest interest is in the South Coast, Nipomo. So the North Coast doesn't want it. They're saying give it to the South Coast. Is that what I'm reading here?
Yeah. And because the survey is anonymous, we don't know how many of the session participants that we asked this question to overlap with the survey participants. But it could be this region is not immune to, like, I want it, but I want it somewhere else. So that could be true too, but we don't know that. I think, but for the survey, of the 150 or so people, nearly half of that were from the North Coast. So no correlation, no way to correlate the data between these two.
Okay, I kind of came across the North County and North Coast, and they're not looking at the growth, they don't need that, and we like the way it is here, and somebody else. What it was starting to look like, so thanks.
That's
for
an interesting
your
question.
information, yeah.
Let's see what's that. Peter.
Do you feel like that was a good turnout? It's like, if I'm doing the math right, that's like 1% of the population of the county.
For the session and the survey?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think for a beginning conversation, as people are getting to know that this project is happening, and because it's not one specific project where they know where it's happening, that's pretty good. It's a more abstract, I think, to people's daily lives, especially when you're talking about a project that's, if it happened and looking out towards 2040. I think it's pretty good. I'm hoping that we get, through all of your help and the partner agencies, more people paying attention and engaging on the future surveys and over the coming 6 months, and getting more people to give their business.
Is that how you're going to continue to do the engagement? Is online or?
No, we've got a few more surveys, and then we wanted to do one more session, which I think we're envisioning is in person.
Like, so we're gonna cover that in just a minute. I'll show you. Jump to that one.
Yeah, just one more thing to say. Your large, just to kind of remind us all, the large and medium, like kind of acre feet, is it 5,000 or 6,000?
Yeah, I think the largest was around 6.
Okay, one thing that might be helpful, for people who haven't memorized how much water gets treated and used around the region would be to like put up some comparisons for what magnitude you're talking about. For example, San Luis Obispo last year treated like 5,300 acre feet, Morro Bay treated like 20.
Yeah, and I maybe didn't, so apologize, I'm gonna go way back here. To a slide. Where that might be more helpful. That all the partners use about 40,000 acre feet. 40,000 acre feet per year. So the little blue slice is what we're talking about, so it's like. You know, at the demand request of 5,000, was that like 1/8 of the pie? Right, so we're not talking about huge, we're talking about filling in some gaps where we have issues in the county with supply reliability. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay. So sorry to jump through, oh, and maybe just while we're, so here's 7,000 acre feet for the large. Medium to, so almost 7,000 acre feet for the large here too, so. Okay, all right, so sorry, we already got through all these.
Excuse me, I do have one comment on online meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, just quickly, the biggest issue for me, Carolyn, was just the time, the 5 o'clock time. It's tough to get, you know, either, I think I was going home at that point. Get on as quickly as possible. I love things at 5 o'clock. It was a little bit.
Well, and maybe let's come back to that after I just show you the next steps, because I think we'd love to have some feedback about what actually would work. I mean, we debated what time, because if you do it during the day, a lot of people don't have jobs that allow them to take 2 hours out in the middle of the day to do a water related. So anyway, we were debating on what made most sense, so we can talk about that a little bit. Okay, so the next steps was, I think we've already talked about this, to evaluate those 12 concept alternatives at a high level, screen them down to 5 to develop more detail. And then we want to be doing more community engagement and surveys. And we're going to do the next WRAC meeting and public workshop is going to be in Q1 of 26. So this is a high level schedule. We've shown this before. The red shows where we're at right now. We'll probably try to do a survey this fall that's shown in, here. We do another public survey, but here is where we're showing we're going to be doing another community session sometime in Q1 and a WRAC meeting as well. So really what we're trying to do before we get there is to have done this screening so that we have the 5 alternatives kind of identified, at least which 5 we're carrying forward. So that's the plan. So maybe we can come back to this question of what makes sense for a community meeting if we're doing it in person. Is it better to do it at night, later than 5, during the day? Any thoughts? Both.
Both, absolutely. I think places like senior centers in the middle of the day and working and family people toward evening. One thing that is often forgotten is that a lot of people either don't drive and depend on transit or don't drive at night. That's a lot of the elders. And if you're doing it at a time when the days are short, that latter issue is particularly important. So there should be at least one daytime option that people who don't drive at night or people who don't drive at all can get to. And there should be at least one evening option, and ideally in a place that's fairly easy to get to by people who use other means than their own cars.
And where would that be?
Well, look at the transit schedules and recognize that people need to get home.
Okay.
I'd recommend you do it in an area in one of the 5 areas that you.
And that had been our original thought, was to try to have geographically different areas to try to recognize that, this is a pretty big county. You could spend a lot of time driving from one end to the other, right? But we still could try to do like one at, in the afternoon, and then relocate and do one in the evening and, make it the same day, but,
In terms of.
I don't know that every
accessibility
location
of
is gonna be
folks,
on a transit route,
Morro
right?
Bay and particularly somewhere near the Triangle Park and Pismo Factory outlet or somewhere near there are the most suitable in terms of people getting home who navigate by public transit.
You should consider the high school and then some. It's a good location. A lot of people will show up and have a nice day.
Just an impromptu question, didn't have that one on there, but since you brought it up, thought it was worth asking.
Yeah, go ahead. It was
Lori,
going to
right?
be like a tough and evening. Rehab in person.
Oh, yeah, I think we would probably plan to do that, let people be online, just like we're doing
So
here.
they have.
Yes, right.
And to the extent that end users would be inland, right here is perfect. Both the city system and the regional system radiate from right there.
So the library.
Yeah, so when you're looking at participants and not just the coastal people who are immediately impacted, right here.
All right, so that's all I had for slides. I don't know how we're doing for time, Joey, Brendan. Do we have time for more questions?
Yeah.
Couple more minutes? Okay. Any other questions for any of us?
Right. I know you won't be able to give me a real complete answer for this, but is there any nexus to agriculture in desal? I mean, if I'm gonna pay $5,000 for an acre of desal water to more water for ag, they're just to pump it. Is that in the equation here?
So that's back to what I was saying, is that we're not there yet by any means, and I'm not sure we'll even get there by the end of this project, have it all figured out. But the idea is, if you're going to be doing these paper exchanges and if you were trying to do a project that was large, that had more water available than what those immediate needs are. And then that might be like in wet years that you have more water that's available. What do you do with that water, right? Well, that's where it would be great if you did have some partnerships with one of these groundwater sustainability agencies that frankly need to come up with a plan of how to address their groundwater overdraft. And you can offset their pumping by giving them water. Now, like I said, they would need to pay into the system then, right? So a lot to be figured out, but that's the idea, is it could be beneficial for trying to go to a more sustainable countywide for ag and our users.
Okay.
Thank you. Just want to do a quick plug for the website, the email list. For those of you who aren't already subscribed, if you go to our desal website, subscribe, and then you'll get notified when we have updates or when the next community meetings are coming up. We post our deliverables there, so that's a good place to check on and subscribe. Tell your friends if they might be interested also. And there's a place on the website for submitting comments, and that's open. I mean, hopefully be nice, but up to you. You can submit anything you want on there. It's just an open forum for you to send us feedback, send us input, whatever you want to provide via that mechanism. So thank you in advance.
Can you repeat the website?
Yes, it's slowcounty.ca.gov/desal. And if you Google San Luis Obispo County desalination, it should be like the first thing that pops up too.
All right, well, thank you, desal team, especially Lydia, Carolyn, and others. We'll go on to item 4 then of our agenda. Ongoing updates. First one is, and speak up if you have any comments or questions on any of these. First one is the rain and reservoir report.
Just an observation, and we did get some rain, but
Yes,
I
we
don't think we got enough to activate the first flush.
Okay. Thank you,
We're
Eric.
thankful for every drop we get, even
Yes.
when it's raining.
More lightning strikes than drops.
Drought updates. Groundwater basin management efforts. Flood control zones. Integrated regional water management.
I'll just note, our call for projects for the replacement in our active fire agreement grant, we received 4 projects, so we'll have updates for the WRAC either in November or December as that process moves along.
Is that kind of looking at the new Prop 4?
No.
That's still being developed.
Yeah, they're Prop 4, at least for the funds that were designated for the Department of Water Resources. There's a trailer bill in the assembly that will outline how the guidelines and the programs that were funded via Prop 4, how those programs will actually be defined and actually operate, are going to be more closely governed by the assembly via emergency regulation process. So DWR is not given a blank slate to create the programs now. The assembly and the state legislature are taking more control over that.
When
So-
we have more information, that can be on our agenda.
Yeah, I think it will be
Like
slower
early next year.
than usual. Is my commentary on that.
Anything else on that item? Okay. Moving on, master water report update.
Significant updates.
Okay. State water project.
Next Tuesday at the Board of Supervisors on the consent agenda, item 11, at the beginning of the day, the agreements with the various outside and inside the county relative to the water transfers not to exceed 7,000 acre feet is on the agenda. I think this is the thing we sort of were talking about earlier, but I have not yet seen the staff report. It should be becoming available by this afternoon to see the details, but you can watch for it on the agenda packet for next Tuesday, consent agenda item 11.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. Desal, I think we've heard a lot of good stuff on desal today. Various county water programs, policies, and ordinances. And open reporting on water conservation opportunities and information. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, future agenda items. Anybody have any future agenda items to suggest? Hearing none, then we'll move on to item 6, public comment on items not on the agenda. Anybody in the room? Anybody online, Joey? All right. And finally, item 7, we'll adjourn the meeting. We'll see everybody first week in November.
Yeah.
Enjoy your October. Thank you, everyone.